welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who, unlike all the others, does not have a fairy.
Tim Longo.
Without a fairy, you're not even a real man.
Yeah, that's what they say. That bully, what was his name?
Mido? Yeah.
Mido. It's funny that would have been.
What'd you name yourself there, by the way?
Just Link. Link. Yeah. Why? What did you name yourself?
Samia.
Nice. That's going to be your name forever now, or for a while.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway,
nice.
That people who are listening will already know what we're talking about because I'll have put in a little intro stinger music. But we are turning our attention to a new game. We just finished a series, and we do expect to have one and possibly two interviews. But it's just a scheduling thing to get them done. So they may be along in a couple weeks. But we thought we would finish out the year with a classic, looking at Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. That's like slipping back into a warm bath, I think, for both of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially coming off of Vampire, they're in so many ways it couldn't be the more opposite. As far as at least an action adventure kind of space.
It's so earnest as well, right? I mean, there's a definite different mood with this game compared to where we've been.
Yeah, and I to get it done up front. Full disclosure, even though I'm a huge Zelda fan, I don't think I finished this game back in the day. I've only, I think, maybe attempted it once or twice, but yeah, I predict as Brett predicted for me as well that it probably is in the infamous water dungeon. That maybe is where how far I got, or temple, but I don't really remember even where I stopped. So there is a save on my cart that, because I'm using the original cart and original N64. I still have it. It's actually the collector's edition golden cart.
I remember that cart, right?
Yeah, which I actually bought off of Hal Barwood. So it's his version, which I think no, actually, so funny. Troy had a save on there that I'm sorry, Troy, I deleted it. To make room for mine. It looked like it was just he didn't get very far. Only had 3 hearts. And then I don't know who Mr. Rhythm is. But
oh my God, I do.
Is that you?
Yes.
I thought it sounded familiar. I was like,
I can't remember how that came up. That was back on like Starfighter or something, or probably Jedi Starfighter, because I first played it, and I don't think I finished it at this time because then I had to go work on Full Throttle 2. But after Jedi Starfighter, I had like a week or 10 days where we were in submission for Jedi Starfighter, and at some point on that project, I had said something like, I've got the rhythm in me. I'm Mr. Rhythm. Or
this
something like that.
This is all coming back to me.
And that became like my character name in things for a while. So it would have been right around that time probably that I first, that we had that conversation.
I read it and I was like, Mr. Rhythm, that sounds really familiar. Who's that? Jake Stevens? Who is that? It's
that's
good. You. So yours, I'm playing on a cart where you have a save game.
Where I have a save.
Did you finish it?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if you opened up
on that cart,
you should look next time and for next week, and we can find out how far I got. I'm pretty sure I did not finish it at that time. I have no idea how far. I have since. I subsequently have played it through. I have the Wind Waker pack-in pre-order version that was ported to the GameCube in 2002 or 3 or something like that, and I have the Master Quest disc somewhere as well. But they have a bunch of Zeldas on this cart, or on this mini disc. It's very that's very funny. Oh my God, I had totally forgotten about Mr. Rhythm.
Yeah, me too, apparently. But it was lodged in my memory someplace, and I just had purged it, blocked it all out. because I didn't want to remember. But now I know. So yeah, Mr. Rhythm is on there. So I deleted Troy's because he clearly didn't make it very far. So and I have my original one. So eventually I'll load that one up and see how far I actually got. The thing is I restarted because I also had the GameCube port. I restarted it on that one, so I think that was the one I actually got farther on. So
okay,
I probably should have deleted my old one because it's probably not any good. But anyway, yeah. So I'm playing on the original cart with no bells and whistles,
and I'm playing on the Wii, so I've got progressive scan, and 640/480, I guess. So yeah, it looks as good as it's ever looked. I mean, it might look better, I guess, in the port to the 3DS, but
3DS,
it's a much smaller screen. Yeah. So, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Rhythm. Well, let's take a look back at 1998 in games. We've done a few games from this year on the show, and it's funny to me to think that we're doing this one after having done all of these other three, but
sure, yeah.
I could see why too, based on the ones we've done. We've done Metal Gear Solid, of course, Half-Life, and Thief. I don't think necessarily in that order, but we've done those three on the cast. Actually, yeah, no, I think it's just those three. I was thinking, maybe there might be one more. I may be wrong about that. I did not go. I should put all the dates on the page that's on devgameclub.com so that I can just quickly do this beforehand. But anyway, there are a bunch of really good games this year. This is one of those years. It was my first year. Yeah, this is my first year in the industry, and the game I was most looking forward to that year was Grim Fandango, because I was a PC adventure game player, and that was part of why I came to LucasArts. I was looking forward to that game so much. But on the console side, there's also Banjo-Kazooie, which is a great platformer. I played a whole bunch of that in the recent collection that was on the Xbox One. Crash Bandicoot on the PlayStation 1. Some other stuff. I have a couple of JRPGs in here. Xenogears and Suikoden 2 are both supposed to be kind of amazing. On the PC, it's a lot of the and Resident Evil 2. I didn't want to forget that one. On the PC, there's a lot of good RPGs, Fallout 2 and Baldur's Gate among them, probably the biggest from that year. But also a whole new era of competitive engine building with Unreal. StarCraft is another game that I played an awful lot of that year and the years following. Star Siege Tribes I marked down because we played a lot of that at LucasArts on the LAN, and Falcon 4.0, which I can remember being a really big deal that year. It came with a 500-page manual. It was ridiculous. The avionics simulation of that game and how complicated all of that was. We looked at it, of course, because we were making a flight sim. It was our game was a lot more flight simmy at the time that we were looking at Falcon 4. Anyway, so yeah, good year.
A very good year. Is Rogue Squadron on here?
Rogue Squadron was this year as well. I didn't mention it, but yeah, Rogue Squadron was this year.
Oh, I see it on Windows. I wasn't sure if it was on.
I am pretty sure.
Oh, it was same. Almost. How funny.
Yeah, it was
Windows first. That's weird. A couple days earlier, but anyway, yeah, the N64.
Yeah, that probably had to do with just what days things went into stores. I don't really remember that at the time. We used to think of Tuesday as the day, but that's no longer really true. I don't think. There's a lot of Fridays now as well, but back then there were specific days when games would come out, Tuesdays and Thursdays, maybe something like that. I don't remember specifically, but and so it was probably something along those lines. Anyway, this is also the fifth time we've done a game on the cast by Shigeru Miyamoto, who was the producer on this project. So not the director, although it's not really clear. His hands are all over this thing. But it's also not really clear how to think of what that role means for him. he originally wanted this to be a first-person game, for example, but when they decided to go with younger and older Link, which of course we won't get to this time, he decided it was really, really important to be able to see the character, so that that has happened, right? And that you have that connection with the character, which was an interesting tidbit for me to find. So he definitely had important things to say about how this game was made. It also had a number of directors, 5 different directors working on different aspects of the game, and a team of 120 people, which was an astonishing number at the time. 4 times what I would say we had on Starfighter, which kicked off in this year. Ish, 3 to 4 times as many people. Granted, it's a much bigger game, but it's still that kind of is amazing. It's also the biggest game I think that ever came out on the GameCube. It was or on the Nintendo 64, but it was originally meant to go with the 64 DD expansion, and instead they killed the expansion and they made the carts carry more of the weight. So it was a bigger cart than anything else. And I don't know that other games ever made it quite to the size that this one did. Of the directors, 2 that are particularly notable to mention are Eiji Aonuma. Apologies if I am butchering that name. I probably am, because he still leads the series today. And Yoshi Koizumi, who has been part of a lot of the mainline Mario and Zelda games, dating back to Link to the Past. I'm sure there's a lot more names in the credits that are worth remarking upon. Koji Kondo, for example, in the music and et cetera. Mm-hmm. And we may sprinkle that stuff in over time. So that's one of the best games of all time. Routinely kind of in that conversation, and at the time, truly astonishing. I can remember that, just how blown away people were.
Yeah, it was. I mean, over the top as far as its impact, and just like you said, surprise. And I think how surprised people were. I mean, we talked about this a lot with, of course, with Mario 64, but seeing. So I was trying to think. So I feel like an idiot for asking this, but the previous Zelda game would have been Link to the Past, right? Like mainline.
Yes, that may be true. Yes, I think that may be true. I will look that up, because I actually don't know, because I haven't played them all, but I'm pretty sure that's true, because I think that's on the collection. You have to pick between the games, and I'm pretty sure that's the order it goes.
Yeah. So I was kind of we were talking earlier in pre-show about sort of like Metacritic of all time, which, Metacritic, OpenCritic, whatever. I mean, it's not the best, but it's at a 99.
Yeah.
So it is probably one of the top. I don't have the all time list here, but
so it's Link to the Past, then Link's Awakening, then Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, so Link's Awakening, kind of it's kind of a mainline one, but it's also not really. It's on mobile as well as, or on handhelds rather, but also kind of the story even is a, not to give it away for those who haven't played it, but anyway. But I guess my point is like, even coming from both of those two to this game, for me at least, it may just be because of what I'm a fan of, as I've said multiple times on the podcast. But for me, going from the 2D Zeldas to this is just revelatory. And because I hadn't played this one in so long, I guess I hadn't thought about it in a while, and I think I've said on the podcast, I played over 200 hours of Breath of the Wild, and, and it's like, I'm fully engaged, in the potential of a 3D Zelda, but you don't, until you go back and, like, if you really think about putting it in context of 1998 and putting it in the context of the previous mainline game being another amazing game that we've played for the podcast, Link to the Past, and then you play this and you boot this up or whatever, and you start playing, and it's just like, if you really try to put yourself back in that moment, it's pretty incredible. Like,
yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Holy cow, what they put together for this thing. And again, like you said, I remember, because we were all, LucasArts was working on some pretty infamous N64 games at the time, and I think we've talked about Shadows of the Empire and things like that. So LucasArts was in whatever, like, as a company, sort of in the family, right, so to speak, of Nintendo stuff. And so then 64 was a hot topic, any new game that came out. And then when this one came out, you mentioned Wayne Klein. My memory is Hal Barwood, having conversations with him
Sure.
about it. And in fact, he's who I bought my cart from, my collector's edition. And so it's
I remember I talked with Tim Schafer about it as well, because he played it after he shipped Grimm and went off, and I don't know, he went off to like Tibet or something as well, and then came back. And he was playing it, and we were talking about it in terms of the company was trying to figure out how to make things that were that good, right? to put it frankly. And so he was looking at it in terms of, and thinking about his next game, and which he wanted to be action adventure, and ultimately it would be, sort of action platformer with Psychonauts, which took quite a while to build. But he started on a concept at LucasArts that had some elements of that in terms of what the flavor of the thing was going to be. It was going to be a third-person action adventure game. Sort of a weird. Psychonauts is definitely a much weirder take, I think, on the concept that he had in mind while he was still at LucasArts. Anyway, and he wasn't the only one, because I can remember John Knowles, who's now on Forza, had a whole concept for a thing, and others. Bill Tiller, I think, had a thing. So it was very much like impacting the industry, this game.
Yeah. I mean, a meteor hit, basically, right? Like, it just, and the ripple effects. I mean, to go back to a little bit.
Quite a year for meteors, because Half-Life as well, right? I mean,
yeah.
Half-Life in May or March or whatever it was, with the day one demo that was like on a magazine or something like that. Magazine cover back when we did that. That was Meteor 1, and then, like, an asteroid hits in November when this game comes out.
And then, well, and Metal Gear 2, right, on PlayStation 1 was like,
sure.
What? That didn't seem possible. Another one for me would have been StarCraft, had come out this year, and so, like, it just, we talk, when you compare it to, obviously Mario 64 also had a big impact, but I think in that case, camera and controls were really more of the focus of the innovation, I think, and of course level design, and go back and listen to that series if you want to hear. And as I've said, I'm more of a Zelda fan than a Mario fan, but I feel like with Zelda, with Ocarina of Time, they had not more, but different fundamental problems to solve that I think in many ways might be more complicated, in my opinion.
Sure. I totally agree.
Because they had to, there's so many more verbs and so much more depth with the possibility space for a Zelda game. Mario tends to be moment to moment and in the levels, like, what does this level have to offer, and then they kind of build things around that. Obviously the camera that they did for Mario heavily helped them, heavily impact Zelda as well, and so they're riffing off of their successes there. But Zelda is, not only that, but I mean, we will get to it later, but the world side of Zelda as well, right? Hyrule Field, which we'll talk about in the future, Night and Day, they're just fundamental things shifted that would have rippled through the industry and the medium for, until today.
And a lot more sort of cinematic approach to everything. I mean, this game starts with a in-engine cutscene of this first flight by Navi, that sort of flies through the the village, Kokiri village, I guess is what they're something like
Uh-huh.
that. And you see all the people you're going to want to talk to as it flies through, right? And you will end up talking with all of those people. Each of them teaches you something different about how to see the world, or how to use, the verb set in the world. There's like, oh, this one you're going to have to target to talk to because they're off, kind of off the ground, and like, oh, oh, what's this about? What's this dude, picking up this rock about, and they sort of just point out these things that you're going to be interacting with in the next moment, as soon as you wake up from sleep. It's and it starts from that. It starts with, look at this, and that's pretty amazing. It's a great moment, and it's the first thing you see.
Well, as a comparison to another game that we talked about in this space that Zelda basically evolved the medium forward in an enormous way, we had a series on the first Tomb Raider game. And as a comparison, like there were some in-engine cinematic moments, but largely the solution at the time was doing, especially on disc-based games, was to do pre-rendered cutscenes, right? To hit these sorts of story moments. And and so you have that comparison there, which looked beautiful, but, did not set you in the space at all. And as we've talked about with multiple games in the 90s, one of the big debates was how do you make the cinematic moments feel more integrated into the game, so you're not pulled out of it, and it doesn't feel like two different experiences. So that was sort of the holy grail for a long time. And I'm sure we talked a lot about that during the Metal Gear Solid series, because those were all in engine as well. Right. But I mean, I definitely agree with you that the cinematography of the opening sequences, and then the cinematics when you finish the Deku Tree, and then when you meet Zelda, those are all well shot. They're shot in a very, very thoughtful, detailed way with very artful framing and angles and distances and shot, and and just the shooting of it is a craftsmanship that, in 3D real-time games of the time, any cinematic moments, just there wasn't a lot of that going on. So I can see why Tim and others were, the LucasArts, everyone takes note of this, right? This right. Revelatory game comes out and everyone's like, okay, this is a new standard. All right, well, let's figure out how they did it.
Yeah, I mean, especially at LucasArts when, that was where the, in-engine cinematic was such a huge thing for them, right? I mean, with Scum, right, as taking control and doing things that you can do in 2D games, for the player, it was pretty wild. It was definitely revelatory, right? In a similar way to Half-Life for people who were working on shooters, right? So yeah.
I guess, that's one of the fun things about the podcast is I don't think about this stuff on a daily basis until I'm forced to, on the podcast
to reckon with
it. Reckon with it and put myself back in that time. And it's like, oh yeah, I totally forgot how big of a deal this was, because there was nothing like it before. Things were encroaching upon it, like Tomb Raider, Mario 64 and stuff, but nothing had really, I think, put the pieces together in this cohesive of a way. And that's, I think, why Zelda has always been my more favorite Nintendo game franchises, because it's more of a cohesive set of things, put together, versus some of the other IPs. So yeah, anyway, it's going to be fun.
Yeah. It's not, hey, here's a random mushroom you jump on, like, or whatever. Yeah. I mean, it's, it's not, I mean, all of that iconography has stood up, but it's mostly because the games are so polished and interesting. It's not that they have some cohesive thing that they're driving towards. It's more like, here's some wacky stuff to do. And this one definitely feels like it's a heroic adventure. And I mean, even going back to the very first game, you have that sense of possibility, right? I mean, it might be a little harder to see today just because the graphics are so far back, but it's still there. It's still there. I've given that game a try. I've never beaten the first one, because after a while it's a little much, and then like you really like there's not as much help, right? So it's like you have to kind of really explore and figure everything out on your own, which can be just time consuming. So it's more I haven't had the time to do it, but
Well, I
yeah,
think, and as you know, and you give me crap about all the time. Like I'm the world building side of games is really important to me, and as well as the story and the characters and such. But on this one, I feel like if you think about Link to the Past, which amazing game as we've talked about, like also revelatory for its genre at the time. And has world building, but it's limited to a degree, right? It can only do so much in that form. And then this, you have such a leap forward with this one, fully realizing Hyrule and kind of how it all works together. And you're seeing these 3D faces and the cinematography alone and the music, the fidelity of all that stuff with a tiny bit of voiceover here and there. But you're able to kind of step into the world much more. At least I am. I think the real-time 3D has always been something that I've enjoyed because of that. You have to fill in the gaps for this version of, low-res version, but you step into the world much more so. And to give you a very specific example, in the section that we played, when you meet and see Ganondorf and Zelda's talking about him, not to jump ahead to that section, but when she's talking about him and describing where he came from, like what ethnicity he is, and that he came from the desert in the West, that is a section in Breath of the Wild where you meet the ethnicity that she's talking about, those people, and they look like him. They look like Ganondorf in this game.
The Gerudo or whatever.
Yeah, and so it's, it's that stuff that kind of like, this is really the first Zelda game that starts to really, and there's some of it in the previous ones, like the fairies and the different regions and stuff in the 2D ones. But this one for me ended up starting that sort of love of the Zelda world and like the attention to detail that they put into it. And that will continue with all the dungeons, because you, just like in Breath of the Wild, you meet each of them, right? Each of the sort of, the races, right, of the land, because they each have dungeons devoted to them, and so you're kind of like unraveling that once again. And you saw all these in 2D small versions, but you didn't get quite the depth that I was looking for until now. Until this,
no, it's a really impressive feat. I mean, and I it's really funny because having played the Super Mario 64 as well, thinking about the problems that you can see in the game, that the problems they were concerned with, right? That they were concerned players were going to have a tough time with, right? You could see it. It's one thing Nintendo has always done really, really well, is that they innovate pretty heavily. And they're really, really good at finding ways to make that innovation palatable to a totally new audience. So I was thinking of like the Wii and how helpful the idea of the Wiimote, which, I mean, you were playing the Wii Sports, I guess was the title that was the pack-in.
Yeah.
And that was a thing that people really got introduced to in a huge way. That was like, there's a lot of Wii Sports machines out there, I think was the comment at the time, because a lot of people got it, and just for that, that was the only thing they ever played. But they were really good at introducing that technology to you. Similarly, with the controller, I think was a big deal with Super Mario 64 and the kind of weird, the Wavebird weirdness, weird shape that thing had. I'm of course playing on a GameCube controller, so I'm not having that. But I do remember that being a thing. Not Wavebird, but that Nintendo 64 controller.
It's such a wacky,
it's such a strange controller. Wavebird was the GameCube wireless one, but the Nintendo 64 one is the one I meant. And they're introducing you to all of that stuff with Super Mario 64, and by the time this comes out, you're a little more familiar with all that. But in a lot of these games, how they do that is by creating characters who represent the mechanic in the world. It's Navi, it's Lakitu, or whatever the name of the camera person is in Super Mario 64. It's the Wii Fit trainer. They just do this stuff, to be like, this person's going to reflect the actions you do. And there's something sort of similar, in Ring Fit, like the ring is a character, and that's a thing that they have done just historically,
Yeah.
and especially starting with the 3D stuff, when I think the mechanics became, or rather the sort of addition of the third dimension became a barrier for a lot of people, or at least they presumed it would be and believed it would be, probably had, evidence from within, because as we've talked about, they tend to show their games to people from all walks of life inside Nintendo, rather than just developers. They found ways to break through to make that more comfortable for people, and I love that about this game too.
Yeah. I mean, I think the characters, especially in Navi's case, which I didn't know this, but you said that Navi was actually internally short for
fairy navigation system.
Yeah, right. So it's like, it's like there's even some fun in the name that they ended up going with, right? Navi actually, like one of the most infamous companion characters of gaming of all time, right? And then it's like Guybrush, right? It's like, what is the origin of that name? Has nothing to do with actual narrative, but I think it's relatable. It makes it more relatable, right? To have a character rather than just a menu or something, right? To kind of, and I think that the village is a great example of that, right? As you've already said, like you're learning. I mean, that's, the whole Zelda thing. You wake up and you're the kid and the chosen one and all that kind of stuff. And then you're in this village and you're meeting everybody, and they each have something to tell you about what your adventure is going to hold for you, whether it be situation or tutorialization, but it's more grounded and relatable, I think, right? Rather than just putting up screens for the sake of putting up screens, and I think more memorable.
Or blocking, I mean, one of the other things that they do very well is block things in a natural way. Like you can't go to the Deku Tree until you have a sword and a shield, right? And although I did, literally every time I've played this game, it takes me forever to find the sword. And then I find it and I go, oh God, why can I not remember to do this? And I know why. It's actually, I think it's one of the rare missteps is like the path to get to it is all instructions about what to do with the sword.
Yeah. Yep. It is not,
and
it is an error.
It is an error. Yeah. It feels like an error. I mean, it makes sense coming back out though. Right. So it's like, but I definitely,
it's literally
every time I've played, this is my third time playing this game, at least, well, more than twice. And literally every time I spend a ton of time mapping out the Lost Woods, usually in text, because I had a computer open in front of me while I was doing it. And, I've got the whole thing. I can tell you how to get to anywhere in the Lost Woods, but the sword's not there. Oh, do I have to do something with this Deku Nut guy? Like, what is the deal with those seed spots? Like, I just spent all this time. And then I'm like, oh, I guess I'm missing something. I'll just go back to town. Like, because I'm down on hearts or something. I was like, well, I'll just go. I know there's that building. You don't have a sword yet. So, I end up walking into, I think it's Saria's house and getting a couple hearts or something like that. So then I'm back up to full. And then I wander around the village again. Like, what else can I do? And then I find the tunnel. And I'm like, God, this stupid tunnel. Every time this tunnel. Anyway.
Well, and all I remembered from the two times that I had played it and of course not finished, is that the Lost Woods is not where the sword is. So then I check it off my list. It's like, okay, and in fact, I didn't even really go in the Lost Woods in this playthrough so far. So it's like, so I just eliminate that. And then I do forget where it is, but I know that's not where it is. So it helps me at least some, but
that's good. I have plenty of notes now about other things I want to do in there. There's a dive pool that as I recall, there's like some boots that you have to wear to get to the bottom of that. Like there's like underwater boots. It's another water temple thing. I mean, it's like all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm glad I have these notes because I'll be able to find this stuff again.
Yeah. Right. But, the other kind of to your point about like that misstep is interesting. And it's not a perfect game, of course. No game is perfect, but it's near perfect. But I think it'll be interesting to talk about some of the, especially contextual movement, I think is going to probably come up time and time again, because we should talk about it as an introduction a little bit today. But I predict that there's going to be, and I remember some frustrations with contextual movement
Yes.
down the road, and I had some in this session. But the thing, and this isn't to throw stones at Vampire, but only because the last game we played, and as we already talked about, it's so different from this in so many ways. And also weirdly being kind of a hybridization game in and of itself. One like psychological, one feeling that I had sitting down to play this is just this sense of ease and like, what do I want to say? Like trust that I have in the game, that I know.
Yeah.
That I know that I will just sit down and it's going to be so well designed. And again, I'm not saying Vampire wasn't well designed. It just had different goals, right? But then Vampire is intended to make it more of a stressful, I think, experience. And I like that at certain times, but I think I was just in the mood for just like sit down, let the game, trust the game, because the game will tell me what I need to do.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the comfort food time of the year now, so I think it's perfectly welcome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's just and also with just everything going on in the world and stuff, it was just nice to know that it will. And I'm not talking about holding my hand. I just think I'm talking about good design that is having me do things. They're very cleverly leading me to the places where I need to go and giving me fair ways to problem solve, and I can just trust it. I trust the game, and I'm sure we'll come back to that theme from time to time with some of this.
I mean, I found myself like there was a certain point which is like I'm pretty sure I know. Like I could remember how to get to the bottom part of the Deku tree, like once you were able to get to the top. But like at every step of the way, there was great game design lessons there of how to prepare you for what you're going to have to do, right? So you need to climb up here. It's clear. And Navi says, hey, you're going to have to climb up here. You've already had to do that. Well, if you went to the Lost Woods, I guess you've done that. You don't have to go to the Lost Woods, as it turns out. But there's spiders up there. So now you have to go past that to find that slingshot to come back. And then getting to that room with the second spider web that you have to burn through. Mm-hmm. The fact that I had to push the block made me think, right, so that has changed the world. In what way has that changed the world? Mm-hmm. That I can do something I couldn't do before I did that, right? Because that's what they're really good at doing.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. And they teach you things like the contextual movement of automatic jumps and stuff, right? Of like how they're teaching you how to judge the distance of those. So okay, I can't. These are automatic jumps, but it's based on distance, and so I need to close that distance, and the block ends up being the way to do that, and water and fire. I mean, even early water and fire puzzles, is revelatory in some ways, right? And carrying fire and time, the timer of fire, the concept that you can't have something on fire forever, and just like the Deku tree specifically, like, and I don't think I'm exaggerating. I think it's probably one of the best introduction levels, / dungeons of all time, as far as like its flow and how, like you said, how it teaches you things in what order, etc.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I totally agree. And you point out a lot of those things, like the timer of the sticks, or like how much a stick can withstand, right? One of the things I did, again, that was out of order was going to the sacred, because it's in the Lost Woods, the sacred grove or whatever it's called. And there's like a wolf that will attack you. You have to kill the wolf to get the gate to come down so you can go through the maze, where there's a bunch of those things that spit. I forget what they're called. But I kept building up to that, and I knew, like, doing it, I knew it was wrong. but I didn't know what else to do to find the sword. So I'm like, maybe it's in here. Like, maybe I have to get that gate down and go through this. I remember going through this maze. I just don't remember why. And it now, like, once I got to the end of it, I was like, oh, right. And it kind of came back to me. But because it's been like 10 years. Anyway, it was the same thing where it's like, oh, I know this is wrong because this is too hard. Like,
yeah,
I'm breaking sticks. Like, I can't just do this with one stick, right? So I haven't been taught the right thing. So even when I'm doing something that is possible, the fact that I had to like build up a lot of money to buy a couple of sticks, a lot of money, 40 whatever rupees, but that's a lot at this point in the game. It just takes a while. You got to go between maps a lot of times. I knew, like, I'm doing the wrong thing here. I'm doing it because I don't know what else to do, which, again, a little misstep there. But I also know. I mean, I do know that it's the wrong thing.
Let me ask you this question, because I didn't deal with the Lost Wood at all. Can you get a shield in the Lost Wood? What is, so I feel like
no, you can get the seeds and the sticks cheaper than from the shop.
Yeah, I just feel like I guess the Lost Wood might be an economy thing then.
Yeah,
I feel like it's almost a misstep that the Lost Wood is accessible this early, because it's.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's that the person somebody says that you have to buy the shield in the shop, but you can get other stuff easier in the Lost Woods or something like that. And so
I remember that.
I misinterpreted that as you should go to the Lost Woods, because they say something like the sword's in the forest.
They do, yeah, but the forest,
and that's a bad translation, sort of.
Yep.
Because it should really say it's here next. It's here in the village. Really is
right.
I think what it should say.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I just because you've spent more time in the Lost Wood, and I don't even remember what's up there. I just was like, why did they put that in there? Like, the village seems perfect without it, and it's just going to cause grief, I think, for people who can't find the sword for other reasons we mentioned. But yeah, it's just interesting. It feels like maybe one of those. I mean, the Lost Wood is a thing, is Zelda thing, blah, blah, blah. But I mean,
right. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it was like a holdover from something, or they had a goal with it that, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, there's definitely, I mean, I think one of the things that I see in it is, here's a bunch of stuff. Like, it's a tease. There's a lot of teases in it. You see I think there's a spot where you can put a seedling in the village. But there's at least a couple in the Lost Woods. There's that maze. You find the fairy fountain is in there, in that grove in the center of that maze. And you can, I guess you could, if you had a bottle, you could get a fairy there.
It just seems like I think it's imagining. I think
it's sort of like a cross with their older games, where there's the literal sense of adventure of, like, I don't know where I'm going. And I can see all these things that I can tell I can't do yet. Like, like I said, there's a diving pool that you can't get to the bottom of, but you can, with the amount of air that he can breathe at this point. There's like that 3, 2, 1 countdown or whatever they does when you dive. Yeah. And you get as far down as he can dive, and it's like you don't have anywhere near enough time, and he just pops back up. But you can see there's a doorway down there. Right. So there's a lot of, like, you're going to be able to do these things sort of instruction that's happening there. But it's also, because you can do that kind of right out the gate, that's super strange. Like, it's weird.
Well, it's overwhelming. I think
it is. If you end up there, it's overwhelming. Yeah.
And for new players who don't know about all that stuff, or haven't played Zelda in a while, like, that's, you just mentioned a lot of different possibility space, options and new verbs or whatever that you can do. There's like, well, do I need to figure this stuff out now? Right. But if you don't know the Zelda formula, you might think, like, should I move on or should I not? Yeah. Or, okay, I come back.
My dad played Twilight Princess on the Wii, and because I sent him, I got them a Wii one Christmas or something, and
you played through the whole thing.
No. He didn't play through the whole thing. But I sent him like a handful of games that I thought he should try out and he'd probably enjoy. And one of them was Twilight Princess. He called me. I was working at Bethesda at the time, and he called me one day at work. and he's like, I'm doing this. And it was the same sort of thing. Like, I can't figure out how to do this thing in the starting village.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think in the end I was saying, oh, right. Yeah, you don't do that. Like, you don't have to do that. Like, and similarly with the Tomb Raider Anniversary Edition, I told you a long time ago, like he was doing the mansion because he thought that would be the tutorial area because that's where she lives. Right.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. And he had no way of knowing that. Right. Yeah, you're right. I mean, similar things here. It is a weird choice. The one thing I do like about it is that you see a place that you'll be able to, that you can tell, like, this is how I'm going to leave the village. There's like this bridge, that you see Saria on when you leave.
Mm-hmm.
She gives you the ocarina. You can get to that in the Lost Woods and have an overlook where you can see it from above. So it is kind of, there are neat things about it, but I agree, it's kind of a weird.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it was for the fans, the more hardcore people who want to see that stuff early on, or it's just interesting. I mean, we don't have to dwell on it too much. It was just a curiosity to some degree, but I wanted to mention, to shift gears a little bit, I did, on going back to sort of the real-time 3D aspect of it, which I would kind of equate a little bit to Metal Gear Solid as well in this year, in this era. The animations in the game are quite good. The example I would give is just even in the very opening, because this wasn't a time when mocap was a thing, or like that, there was some sort of like way to make really realistic, natural looking animations other than keyframes and such. And so when Link wakes up in his bed and sits on the side of the bed when Navi has woken him up or whatever, just that sequence there is just mind-blowing as far as quality. And I think having that be so good with a real-time low poly 3D rig is just another example of like how they're pushing the envelope. And Mario's animations and stuff were good too, but it's a cartoony game where they need to actually get away with pretty quick animations in Mario, right? In Mario 64. So they don't really have an opportunity to kind of show that stuff off. They probably could have, but I don't remember any real need for it because, he's just running around all the time and jumping.
Right.
But here you have a little boy waking up from his sleep and sitting on the side of the bed, which is a bit of a complex little moment for the time. And it just looks beautiful, and that just keeps going. The scene like that you mentioned on the bridge with Saria 2 is another example I thought of just like the way that's shot and the way that Link is reacting to her and she's reacting to him and they're talking. And it's just like these nice moments that were just refreshing because everything else was super action games or horror games or shooters or whatever, and you just don't get this kind of feel from a lot of the stuff at the time.
Yeah, and they managed to do a lot with the expressivity of the faces, even though they are all of like 8 polys, right? I mean, it's kind of astonishing, how much just a good texture on Saria's face, right? Good for the time, sells that moment, like, and just choosing the camera angle where that face is going to look the best it's going to look, to make that moment work. You had mentioned the Ganondorf scene as well, and when he like turns towards where you are, it's a genuinely chilling moment. And it works because they've got just enough on the face and don't try to overdo it. Right, they don't do what they don't try to do what they can't do. They can't afford some real slow lip curling or whatever. Like, they're not going to try to do something like that. It's just a quick, the face is this way, now it's this way, and there's a slight change in the mouth and what have you. And it's like, oh no, in that one moment, and with Saria, when she runs up to you, it's very sort of similar. It's very welcoming. It's very warm. it's very there's a sort of wistfulness to the shot as well when you're leaving town, because I think it's a slow zoom, because she's kind of like, you're seeing her emotion in that very slow zoom. So it's all really, really well done.
And they have that far shot when you're about to leave, where they have like a crane shot that's up above the bridge where you're talking to her.
Yeah.
And they're very small.
Yes.
And Link takes a step backward.
The world is very big.
Yeah, exactly. And then he takes a step back kind of with surprise about like leaving, and then he just runs off the bridge toward the cave, and you just get this, the scale of it, right? Is crazy.
It's like he can't wait to grow up.
Yeah.
Which, kind of a thing with this game. So
yeah, right. Yeah. There's just so much to talk about. Another quick thing I wanted to mention just as an introduction topic is texturing on the N64 at the time, and some of the tricks they were doing. One I would call to specifically that they're just brilliant at making. So I'm playing, as I mentioned, on the original N64. So I have no bells and whistles.
What we call these days the Mr. Rhythm cart.
The Mr. Rhythm cart. Yes, I'm playing on the infamous Mr. Rhythm cart that I'm going to go delete now. So no, but I won't. But they're doing so much with with the type of texturing and low fidelity that you get in this sort of like hardware rendering shenanigans they're doing with this system, I guess. I don't know, you could describe it more, but we talked about it some with the Voodoo cards with Tomb Raider. But it just looks like, textures in general, look like a smear of colors at this era until you get to higher fidelity later. But for instance, when the Deku Tree dies, they did a great job at like with a very economical use of, I don't know how big that texture probably was, but, not very big. And they had that sort of scrolling effect of his bark like hardening and dying. Do you remember that when he dies?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it kind of scrolls up, and it really looks like the wood is changing, like the bark of the wood is changing.
Yeah, like
dying.
He's calcified or something.
Yeah, and it turns gray, and it's just like a beautiful little moment where, again, like the animations, they're doing so much with so little. But they're stretching the system, right? They're doing things with it that as again, being at LucasArts and being actually a tester for a time on Shadows of the Empire, their same system. And this was, when did the N64 come out? It would have been 2 years earlier. Yeah, 2 years earlier. So everyone was still figuring stuff out. But, that's kind of subtlety with how to deal with, because at the time, their textures were one of your main tools, in real-time 3D games to do stuff like that with. You didn't have many tools. And so that's why I'm bringing up texturing. And I think we're going to continue seeing that. Even, for instance, the first of the 3 gems you get, or gemstones, whatever they're called, I forget, the green one.
Spirit stones. Yeah,
spirit stones.
Yeah.
And it has like a transparent green kind of, glossy look to it, and just a lot of nice subtle texture work.
Yeah, I mean the Triforce in the
Triforce
in-engine cutscene as well, right, is very shiny.
Yeah,
they really nailed the look of. I mean, it doesn't look like real gold looks, but it looks like you imagine real gold looks in this world, right? So
convincing.
It works. Yeah, it's very convincing.
And then the music. The music introductions, I want to just, we'll come back to the music, but some of the initial, like
a lot of music in this game, so for sure.
Yeah, and I think the village music underscore there is great. I think we're hearing for the first time like more high fidelity signatures, right? Like the getting to Hyrule Field as well as opening a chest, which has just become like the Zelda opening a chest in Zelda is like just it's a term now, right? It's like, oh yeah, I mean, I think Brett used it in a D&D game recently where he said, yeah, you open the chest like in
Yes.
Zelda, I was like,
Yep.
yeah, we all knew what you meant. So it's like,
the other one I use is the Final Fantasy hero music, or victory music rather. So.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, but yeah, the music will continue to be, and might I add, which, obviously a lot of these are from the 2D games, these melodies. However, I think the versions in this game of those melodies and some of the new ones that they come up with are still part of the signature of Breath of the Wild, and modern Zelda games today. So they've been carried forward throughout all the 3D games from starting with this one. So they haven't really changed much. So
yeah. Now I want to play all the ones I haven't finished that are in 3D. So the Link Between Worlds, is that what it's called on the 3DS? And
I think that game is amazing. Yeah.
Breath of the Wild I haven't finished, and I never even started. I don't think I have it. But the Skyward Sword rather on the
no, I never played that one.
Yeah, on the Wii, I believe. So
yeah,
might be a lot of Zelda in my future. So.
Well, after you finish Kingdom Hearts, then you can start on that.
Sure. Oh man, I remember when I used to play games other than for the cast. Whew, long years ago in August.
Me too. Yeah.
Anyway, do you want to talk a little bit about the Deku Tree, or do you want to get to feedback? I know we've got a little time crunch today. So
let's see. I don't know. I don't know. I guess we hit the Deku Tree generally. We didn't get into specifics, but I guess we can move on.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think the only thing there that I like is how much telegraphing they're doing of the things you're going to need to deal with. You talk to characters who tell you how to solve the puzzle in the next room. It's like, you've got to do my brothers in this order, and then they're like, how did you figure that out? Oh, by the way, do this to Ogma or whatever her name is. The spider, or Goma.
Yeah. Well, and the boss itself was a good tutorial for lots of stuff.
Yeah, it's a good boss and not overwhelming. Like I think the very first time I played, I was like, oh my god, I don't know if I can play this game. I might not be good enough. But it feels a lot better. I don't know if that was a controller problem as well for me. The GameCube controller, because I have played the whole game on the GameCube, feels right when I play it in a way. Because I didn't know the N64 controller as well. I only played a handful of games on Nintendo 64. So
I'm a little worried about the controller for me too, because it's not the greatest controller, and the stick specifically is very finicky. And I have a used old N64, right? And so. So I'm a little worried that there's going to be some difficulty in the future. But yeah, that boss, third time's a charm kind of thing, I think. But it's just a very simple boss that again, I think that whole dungeon is about introducing you to concepts that they're translating. I mean, we won't talk about camera now, but I think we have to talk about camera quite heavily. And we didn't even talk about Z targeting and stuff like that. So we have plenty to talk about in the future. But I think that the Deku Tree for me is almost like they're basically presenting you with the solution to typically two-dimensional game concept in their dungeons from the past games into 3D. Right. You know what I mean? So like the way that the layering is for each of them, how the sight lines are for each of those, especially the central shaft area, you know what I mean? And how you kind of move up through that thing and then dive down through it and all that kind of stuff. And then there's another layer below. So these are all concepts that you had in your head, kind of in your imagination for Link to the Past. Now they're having to present them to you in a three-dimensional space. And so like, I would just love to see early versions of that level design, you know what I mean? Iterating, to see, can you imagine like if Nintendo has any of these old builds, like those are worth gold, couldn't even put a price on them.
Super interesting. Like how they approach the problem is really interesting. Like you're trying to solve so many problems, but it's also like, well, what do we want to introduce? Like, what are we taking from the past games? Like, there's a general structure thing here that they're taking, like, and what, like, oh, find the, well, there's no boss key, but find the map, find the compass, find your way to the boss, kill the boss, all those things, and as well as introducing a new weapon, which is, I think, the 3D, I guess it establishes that for this game, and I guess this will be the last point. We'll take a break. But they're establishing the thing that they do, which is, I'm going to give you a new thing. You have to use it to beat the boss, and then you'll be out, right? And with the slingshot, and that's every game since has done that to some degree. So
it's very economical.
Yeah. Maybe less so Breath of the Wild, actually. So,
yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother
conversation.
I guess. Yeah.
All right. Let's take a quick break and come back and do a little bit of feedback, and I guess talk about it next time.
Sounds good.
Welcome back from the break. We've been, of course, talking about Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, but we do have a couple of emails. No new reviews this time, so a couple of emails sent to devgameclub@gmail.com, though, of course, as I always say, we do love those reviews. They help us reach new listeners. Reach out, tell a friend. Even if you've already reviewed, thanks so much. Tell somebody you think might enjoy the show. So yeah, let's go straight on to email then. We have one. I want to say first, this one you're going to read. I had forgotten that there was a question. There was a second question in this email, which was purely a behind the scenes question to talk with about the author, not for the cast. But so I had forgotten there was a first part, which was another question, which was more something we could read on the cast. So
I see.
Yeah, you remember? Yeah, there's a separate discussion we were having with Blarg 42. So go ahead and read this part of Blarg 42 now.
Got it. Okay, so subject is looking at your games from Blarg 42. Hello, Blarg. First of all, I just want to say you really made my day when you finally decided to sing a Pokemon RPG song.
His Pokemon RPG song.
Sorry, yeah.
Yes.
That didn't make my day, but I appreciate that, Blarg. It was quite a weird but also delightful feeling to hear someone sing my goofy lyrics live on a podcast. Definitely not an experience I've had before. Yeah, it's pretty rare. Unless, of course, you count your previous Beat Poet narration with the sticky out tongue.
Yeah, that's because I think I did that song two ways because I didn't know.
Yeah, right. The double whammy. Yeah, you weren't sure what to do. Yeah, that was also a treat for us all. But don't worry. That was both the first and last song I'll ever send you guys, just in case you were hovering over the delete email button upon seeing my username. Anyhow, my question touches on something you said during your Extended Republic Commando series, which, by the way, I enjoyed immensely despite its vast length and the fact I've never played RC yet. It was fascinating to hear you speak about a game you worked on yourselves, and to hear from your old colleagues, especially those two surprise guests in episode 221. I don't remember who that was. I know who it was. Can't believe you managed to get those industry legends on the show. Joking aside, you said afterwards that it would likely be the last time you would do an episode of that kind, going back to explore your own work. I understand if you prefer to focus on other people's games, but I was wondering if you ever considered doing a bonus episode where you look specifically at games which only one of you has worked on. I'm not saying you should do a 68-part series on Skyrim or anything. Probably nobody would want to listen to that besides me. But maybe a single episode on it, or Tomb Raider 2013, Fallout 3, Halo 5, maybe. Best regards, Blog 42.
That's a tough one. Like, I thought about like having seen this question some weeks ago now. Sorry for the delay, Blarg. It's a tough thing because they're so, first of all, they're relatively recent, right? 2011 for Skyrim, and I don't know, 2008 for Fallout 3, which, they're later than the window we normally play. So there's that. Also,
well, for bonus episodes, we do modern games, though.
That's true.
I mean, he did call it a bonus episode, so I'm not. No, that's true. I agree. I know where you're going with this, but I agree. But,
well, there's also just like a lot of these folks we've worked with recently who are still working at these companies, or I don't know. I sometimes think about it as like, well, it would be kind of fun to interview you about the process of making, what was going on making Tomb Raider 2013 or whatever. But, one of the nice things about playing an old LucasArts game is that LucasArts is effectively no longer around to give us a hard time about it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of nice. And there is just that, like, talking with old friends about, something we did together. So there's that. I don't know. I would feel weird.
Yeah.
The other thing about more recent games is the teams are huge. Right? So I don't know. It's kind of weird to be like, I don't know, like how much I would be able to talk about my contributions to Skyrim. Like there are definitely things I'm proud of, in that product for sure. But it's also such a huge team effort. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, my 2.5 answers. I agree with you on the large team. That's always challenging. I mean, if I played devil's advocate, it probably would be we would just focus on how we saw the game, right? And admit to the fact that it's a team effort, and it's hard for anyone. I mean, any guest we have on, right, is speaking for themselves
only
on a bigger team, but I think the two complications, one, there is a statute of limitations sort of feel to working on games that are fairly recent-ish for yourself. And I think even specifically like in Halo's case, I'm not even sure I should, or that I could legally even, I don't know if I want to tread in that territory, like in an official manner. It's probably okay. And to be honest, I probably could get permission for Halo 5 specifically, because it's gone a little bit, it's further out. But it's just delicate enough to where you do have to be careful, I think, with that stuff, unless it's sanctioned. And for those who probably most people know, but for those who don't, like, there are legitimate PR departments who approve everything that is said, ideally, about games of that scale. And you can't actually, even when you're working on the game or there, you can't say anything unless that you go through that process, which is all there for a reason.
I mean, I've talked about Skyrim, in a few places over the past decade or whatever since it came out. So, I mean, I am generally a little freer with that stuff myself, but I'm also very aware that that's the situation, right? So there's a certain I treat myself as if I'm still there, to a large
respectfully
degree. And I'm very careful about what I say. Almost everything I would say on the subject of these games that I've worked on more recently would be kind of already in the public domain usually, which is a way I kind of cover myself as well. I might have my own sort of spin on it, but you definitely want to keep in mind, like, oh yeah, Todd said this to somebody, right, in some interview. It's clearly fair game to say that, right? Or if somebody asks me something that's a little touchier, to find a way to spin that it's okay to talk about this aspect of it. Like, yeah, you know what? It's really funny that if a giant hits the ground, the physics impulse is so enormous, you're shot hundreds of feet into the air. That's a bug that is a bug, but is also really funny, right? So we left it. Like, we knew that was there. It was really funny, so we left it, right? I mean, that's not, anyway. So it's just, I don't know. It's a really delicate thing. So
yeah. And I tend to, I think with Halo, it's more maybe because of the mothership side of that versus, but I think Bethesda's more understanding probably of
Well, it's
that.
the same
was.
mothership,
It is now. Yeah. And then the third answer for me, that just to give some more color to it for people, in Tomb Raider's case, as an example, it gets even more complicated because I changed roles while on that project to franchise director, and then also wasn't there at the very end when they shipped, So I also feel awkward talking about Tomb Raider sometimes because of that. I mean, I devoted many years of my life to that game and still stand and am proud of what my contributions were, but it was definitely a team effort, and I wasn't able to ship with them. So, and so, those sorts of things, like I have to make a personal decision on how to talk about stuff publicly sometimes because it wasn't as clear cut. So my only point there is each game has its own story, its own kind of situation where you kind of have to make a call on stuff. So, but I like Starfighter. We could do other stuff. I don't know, but yeah, I think we were to some degree hesitant about RC. So I think that the fact that we even did that was probably are going to be a rare occasion, but appreciate the question and the interest
and the thinking behind it for sure. Yeah. We know it's because you're interested in hearing me in particular go on and on, but
Yep, me too. I can't wait to hear that part.
Thanks, Blarg. This other one is from Nambulus. The subject is Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. This is a very, very narrow targeted question. It's involved here a little bit. Hi, Dev Game Club. Just finished listening to your series about one of my favorite RPGs of all time. I started playing this game in 2004 on release day, before they even got their one and only official patch out, and players had to use the console in order to complete the game. In parentheses, he notes, trying to escape from the Society of Leopold would always crash the game in the release version. The next part of the game had to be loaded manually via console before that happened. Yikes.
Holy cow.
Yeah, still our Wild West origins there. Since then, I must have played and finished that game 10 times, at least once for each clan. Every 1 or 2 years, I grab the newest unofficial patch and check out what changed, which is quite a lot now with all the restored content. Anyway, I don't think you discussed one issue I was really looking forward to. Sorry if you did and I somehow missed it. Throughout the game, and especially after all major events, the player receives these emails like, quote, a pawn, clearly the player character, is moved. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they are always signed with a friend. Yeah. Who, in your opinion, is that friend? Thanks for your show. I really hope you can get those interviews for the next episodes. So
I'm so glad that he brought this up, because you had briefly mentioned something about it last in the final episode, and then it dawned on me that I didn't pursue that at all. I never figured it out. I just forgot, because there's one point toward the end, right, where your computer's gone at the end of the game. You can't actually access it anymore when you meet Jack in your apartment. The computer's not there. So I was like, I'd have to load up an old save game to reread those or something.
Yeah, actually, I missed a lot. I kind of didn't go back to my home base much until I got the Shreknet quest line.
Yeah, same.
And then I had a bunch of emails, and I was like, I should do this quest there was like a quest for Vampire Blood for LaCroix. There was some other stuff there, and I was doing all of that stuff at that point. But I didn't sort of at each major step go back there, even though I had Heather, the woman I saved at the blood bank. I don't know if you did that.
Yeah, I did. I did end up doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. So she ends up getting killed by the Sabbat or something at some point. Anyway, it's
is that true? I don't. She.
Yeah, I think it's the Sabbat. I think as you make your way down,
it might have been a Sabbat. She got killed. I feel like she got killed right after I released her.
Interesting. Yeah, that not for me. She was there for a long time in my apartment. In fact, one time I went back.
She died right away. Somebody got her.
Wow, that's wild.
I think it might have even been the police. I think she.
Interesting.
She
had brought back somebody to my apartment, like a dude.
What?
And she's like, I brought back food for you. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I think it's probably
I had some
because
other weird stuff in my apartment. Like there was one time I came back to the apartment. This was after she had died. My television talked to me. I just had this long conversation with the news anchor. You know,
oh my god,
that was clearly all in my head because I'm the Malkavian. Yeah,
that's
so
cool. That's
so many
cool.
good things. Yeah, yeah.
Holy cow! Yeah, this game is just a treasure trove of things like that. Yeah, no, I think. Yeah, anyway, yeah, I had talked. I think the way that I had talked to her after I released her, I let her feed on the guy that was there, and then they caught.
She became a ghoul or something and got a taste for it.
They caught her, and then they like, you killed that guy, and then I think they killed her or something. But,
okay. Yeah, I had sent her back to my apartment. Like, that's a choice you can make, I think. It's like, no, just go meet me here. Or she meets you on the street or something. And I sent her back to my apartment. I don't remember what the specifics were, but yeah, that's wild. Yeah, so that's a divergence we didn't even cover. So that question opened that right back up. Yeah.
It just dawned on me, maybe the person sending the emails was the cab driver.
Yeah, that would be my inclination. Because I couldn't think of anybody else. In fact, the thing that most supports that for me is that Jack says to him in the closing cutscene, you know, like, "Hey, it all worked out like you said," or something like that. You know, when the cabbie steps up.
Yeah,
and it makes me think that the cabbie was, who we think is Cain, was making all these moves.
Wow, that's pretty neat. That's pretty neat.
But I didn't get a lot of those emails. Like, I had kind of forgotten that was a thing because I just didn't go back to my apartment.
I think they come
really until that part later. Yeah.
Don't you think I thought, well, I didn't either, but I feel like they were there anyway. Well, maybe I went back more than you did. I feel like I got maybe 4 or 5 of them. And they all
like I got maybe 3. They weren't like piled up or anything like that. So.
Okay, yeah, they were all cryptic, and I feel like there was maybe one in, like, the last one in the chain, in the series, said something about a possible quest that you could go do, but I didn't pursue it. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, I now I'm kind of interested to know. I'll have to go look it up and see if those mails result in anything or if they're just flavored text.
They felt pretty flavory to me, like that they were.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Wild. What a game. What a crazy game.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's got that great RPG feel of just, lots of questions and not everything's going to be answered. I mean, it's like, since we're playing, you and I are playing a lot of tabletop right now via mediated by the internet. You're trying to do the same stuff, like pull in names and like places you're going to see later,
breadcrumbs.
Throw the breadcrumbs down, or even just like enrich the world, I don't know, wrap up your chicken cutlet to, I've lost control of the breadcrumb.
You've lost it.
Metaphor at this point. And in any case, thank you for the question, Ambulus. I guess what we're coming down is probably the cabbie.
Yeah. That would make the most sense, and I think the coolest. What I need to go look up, or maybe he can write back in about, is, do they ever tell you if you do keep reading them and pursue it, or if there's even something to pursue? Is there some clear message there that comes from him? Because again, if you're playing as Nosferatu, that cabbie was not a part of my life until the very end. So I had no like real connection to him. So I wouldn't have had that theory unless somebody asked me. Like, my first reaction actually was the guy with the round red glasses.
Right. Yeah. That was another one, the blood magician. Yeah. Whatever. Tremere, I guess. Yeah. He's another one I think about just because he is there when your life is saved.
And isn't one of the endings related to his whole thing?
Yes, yeah. He has the warehouse ending where he recognizes the danger of the Inkaran whatever and sarcophagus and has it put in a museum or put.
But it makes the most sense that it's the cabbie though, because you don't really
because he's the least sort of known and knowable.
Yeah,
in some ways.
Yeah.
So it does have the sense of an old master, playing.
Yeah,
playing
I wish for Nosferatu they would have found a way to integrate him better then, because I think that's a pretty big omission for the whole game, for most of the game for me. Because if that theory is true, I don't know if they confirmed it ever, or if we know that it's true. But if he is Cain, like that's a huge thing that I didn't really get to experience.
So I didn't spend any other. When I would take the cab, I would just walk up to him and he'd take me somewhere. Like there was no deep interaction. It was literally just I had like three different ways of saying yes, take me, and one that was like no, I clicked on you by mistake, right? It was basically I had one, and they were all weird Melchizedek ways of
okay.
So there wasn't like a deep interaction there that you missed. It was really just he's literally the way he's literally just a doorway to the other locations on the map.
Yeah.
But he is there and present throughout the whole game for me in a way that he's not for you. So that there is some difference there.
Yeah.
There was another location too in Santa Monica that I never had to go to, but I remember walking up to and thinking, oh, maybe there's a thing here. So there are places that I feel like either had content that was cut or were just there for flavor, but are not really clear that they're just there for flavor. It's a named location, and you see the sign and you think, oh, there's probably something to do with that. And I don't know, maybe I just didn't find those things, right? So it's there's that too, because there were quests that you found that I didn't, and I think vice versa. So anyway. But yeah, thanks for the question, Nambulus. I guess we'll just talk about next time. I think what we've decided is we're going to kind of luxuriate in this game. We're heading into the winter. It's getting colder and wetter where you are. And it's time to like really seep, be in a warm bath. That is Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. So we're just going to do up through... basically up to getting the next stone, which is Death Mountain, and the village. So if you want to do other ancillary thing around that stuff, Tim, I don't know, you're going to mainline it, do whatever is best as far as you're concerned. If you get through that and you're like, you know what, I could do some Lon Ranch or whatever else, feel free, or more of the Kakariko village, feel free. We can talk about how they layer on additional stuff with the game as well if we do any of that. But we are going to probably take 5 or even 6 weeks on this game, largely because Tim's such a Zelda lover. So
yeah, it'll be fun. A warm blanket and not having as long sessions, I think for us is going to be good for this season too. So
yep, for sure, sure.
Cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so am I. I was looking for my notes to self. Thanks again for those who sent email to devgameclub@gmail.com. You can, of course, also shoot us reviews through mostly the podcast infrastructure and on iOS, but also, whatever podcast app you use. If you don't hear us read it on the show, please just shoot us a mail and let us know what you wrote so that we can read it out. We love to read that stuff. And you can find us on the web at devgameclub.com and on Twitter at devgameclub. We can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
And finally, our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton and commissioned by friend of the cast, Aaron Evers. Have fun riding that pony this week, and good night.
Good night.